This is Money Stories.
Brought to you by Amy and Ben from In Financial Services. Today we're joined by Casey Taylor from Tailored Property Wealth. Casey is a buyer's agent who also owns Tailored Property Wealth. Today Casey will take us through his money story and how he's managed to build a property portfolio of over $8 million.
Welcome back to another episode of Money Stories. I'm Amy and I'm here with Ben.
I'm Ben, yep.
And we're here with a very exciting guest today, Casey.
Thank you for having me on.
Casey, can you give us a little spiel about yourself?
Yeah, sure. A little bit of a spiel.
Straight into it.
Just like a 30-second elevator pitch about who you are.
Yeah, cool. So I am the owner of Tailored Property Wealth, which is a buyer's agency. We specialise in helping people invest in property nationwide. So that's kind of our bread and butter. Originally, I am from a small town, Tamworth. Been in Newcastle for about 10 years now and worked my way through kind of finance and different bits and pieces and started to invest in property, built a portfolio of 10 properties, roughly around $8 million value now, and that's a little bit about me, I guess.
I'm very excited to hear more about your story.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting story unpacking all that.
Definitely. Can you tell me how's your week's been?
Yeah, pretty good so far. We're coming up to the end of the financial year, so it's getting a little bit busy, but yeah, it's been pretty good.
What do you think people need to know about the end of financial year coming up?
Oh, well, I think the most important thing for most people and investors is just getting all their tax returns sorted, which can be a big job, but getting the right team in place for that, getting a good accountant and just a good team around you to get that sorted out and make that as easy as possible is going to make it easy. Yeah.
True. Okay, well, let's just get into the money story. Casey, you touched on it a bit before, but let's just dive right in. Give us a full breakdown from the beginning.
Yeah, how you got from that farm boy to the
Definitely wouldn't use the word farm boy. So I guess growing up in Tamworth, lived in town there for a while. I think everyone thinks we're on farms out there, but that's not the case. It's still residential out there.
Yeah.
But
when you said it, I did imagine just dirt.
Yeah. Everyone thinks we're all wearing Akubaras and all the rest of it, but it's really not like that. But I guess I think it was 15. I did move out of town onto 50 acres at that point in time. Still wouldn't say I was a farm boy, but we did have cattle and sort of stuff like that. At 16, I got a job on a neighbouring chicken farm. That was my first job, and then
so you said not a farm boy, but worked on a chicken.
Yeah, well, it depends how you look at it, I guess.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe I was a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit of a farm boy.
Yeah, like animals and stuff.
Yeah, nice.
And so started working on a chicken farm, and then also started working at a Chinese restaurant. I applied for jobs, got a couple, and then I just started working a couple of jobs from 16. I started to save money at that point in time. The first thing was just to save towards the first car. And then pretty much once I left school, I just started working a couple of jobs at a time, working hard. Started to really save in the early years. And it was something I was pretty good at, saving. Yeah.
And what do you think made you pretty good at saving? What was the motivation behind that?
Yeah, so I guess growing up, we weren't poor by any means, but we didn't have heaps of money. There was kids at school, they were going on excursions overseas and doing those sorts of things, or just local excursions that we kind of didn't get to go on because it was a big amount. So there was just some things that I missed out on. And that I think just really instilled that I wanted to have choices in my future to be able to do those things and it not be something that wasn't an option. So that kind of instilled that, I guess, that motivation and that desire just to have a little bit more when I was older, when I have a family and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And is that why you took on the 3 different jobs?
I guess so. Yeah. I think it was. And I just understood that if I wanted to buy something, I had to work for it. I've never been a talented person. I wasn't athletic. I wasn't heaps intellectual or anything like that. So if I wanted something, I had to put in the work, be disciplined, and then save towards that, right? It wasn't going to be handed to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And before we sort of break down like your early stages too much, do you just want to continue with your money story? Because obviously you're in like quite a good position now. So we sort of just want to see how you, like we've got that early stage now where you're taking on those 2 jobs and trying to save up as much as possible and looking for your first car.
Yeah.
But then like, did you get to that first car? And then when did you get to that first property, and sort of just like expanding on that money story to where you are now, basically?
Yeah. So I bought a car. It was only a couple of $1,000s way back when that was. And then once I left school, I was saving. By like 21, I had 32,000 saved, which
That's
back
amazing.
then again was like a fair bit of money.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was
And
just
so
like,
good for such a young person.
Yeah, for sure. And then I did look at buying a house at that point in time, and I didn't have the education to be able to do that. Didn't go through with that, and then I found myself buying a car in cash for like 25K. Pretty much wasted a lot of my savings.
Yeah.
Booked in an overseas trip, and then I borrowed money to then pay for that overseas trip, and then later on that year, then the car blew up, and I kind of went from the start of the year having 32 in savings to being like 20K in debt,
Yeah.
which was really hard to swallow, because for so many years I was saving well, I was in a good position, and then I was in a really bad position.
Yeah.
But it was good to go on the overseas holiday and do that experience. But if I had my time again, I probably wouldn't buy that car.
Yeah.
But the way I just look at it is it kind of was just that switch that needed to be flicked at that point in time, and then I just got back on with working 2 jobs and working hard, paid off that debt as soon as possible. And then I think I'd paid the debt off around 2017, and everything that I was pushing onto that debt, I just started to push onto savings, and I created a really, really strict budget and was saving as much as possible. And then that took me about just over 3 years to save for my first property. And then I purchased my first investment property in 2020, right at the start of COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Great time to purchase.
Yeah.
It was a good time to purchase. A lot of people were freaking out over toilet paper
Yeah.
and all the rest of it. But yeah, that property went on to perform really well. When I then bought that first property, I just continued trying to increase my income that way. But I was also working another second job at that point in time. I was doing Uber Eats, which was a bit of a slog. But I knew that if I wanted to get to my second property, because I went in with a 5% deposit, had to pay LMI, and it was leveraged. Even if that property performed like it did, I couldn't go and extract equity straight away in 12 months' time.
Yeah.
So I saved again for another deposit extremely quickly.
Yeah. Wow.
And I guess those 2 purchases really started to snowball things, because as time went on, I increased my income and the performance in those properties. I was able to get capital growth, leverage into more and more properties.
Yeah.
Going from buying in 2020 to now having 10 properties, $8 million portfolio in 2025. How did you do that in that 5-year period?
Worked my butt off.
Yeah.
Were you a buyer's agent at that time?
No. So the first couple of years I wasn't. So I pretty much, while purchasing property in 2021, I was also working full-time in finance, and then I was setting up the buyer's agency business at the same time. So I was like getting up early in the morning, working on the business, setting things up, go to work, come home, work on setting things up.
Yeah.
So that was a big year to be able to get to that position. And then later on down the track, I resigned in December of 2021, and leads me through to, I guess, doing the business now. But I pretty much from 2017, when I was saving that deposit for the first property, I was learning everything I could about property investing.
Yeah.
When I was doing Uber Eats, I was like listening to property podcasts the whole time. So
Yeah.
I was making that additional cash,
Yeah.
but I was also just absorbing and gaining so much knowledge. So by the time I purchased that first property, even though I only had one property, I had a lot more knowledge than probably one person with one property would have.
Yeah.
So I think that was pretty valuable.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty smart thing. Like, you're doing the Uber Eats, you're earning money, but you're also investing in your own education and building your knowledge so that when you are in a position to buy that property, you know exactly what you want and where you're going with it.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not a glamorous job. And the money wasn't super crazy. Like, sometimes, like, I would do it on a Sunday. Everyone's hungover. So
Yeah.
it was like super busy and you made good money.
Yeah.
But it was just having that flexibility to start and finish when I wanted and be able to do that at the same time.
Yeah.
So how are you feeling now in 2025, where you're at, looking back?
I'm always like shifting those goalposts
Yeah.
personally. So it's like just trying to still gain that. My ultimate goal is to build $20 million portfolio. So if we use a 5% conservative capital growth rate, that's 1 million kind of per year it's growing. So that's my goal, to be able to move towards that.
That's a massive goal, but it also seems quite achievable considering you've built
Where
that.
you've come from and what you've done.
Yeah. And I think it's like investing in general and especially in property, it's like the actions you take today, you're not going to be rich overnight, right?
Yeah.
Or financially free. But it's just understanding it's a long game, and it's like I've been working hard since 2015 to kind of pull back from where I was, right? So it might be another 10-year journey, but it is worth it.
Yeah.
In the future.
Yeah. So let's sort of go back to the start now, and we'll give you some questions to sort of unpack that story. So you've mentioned you've had 2 jobs for what seems like quite a while. You had the farm and the Chinese, and then you've had your like Uber Eats driving, and then starting your own business and juggling all these at the same time. So you're obviously a very hard worker. But when you started investing in like your own knowledge, what sort of drew you to like gaining knowledge around the property sector?
I've always like been interested in property. I think when I was 11, we built a family home, and this was before we moved out of town, right? But just building that, I kind of got interested in floor plans, and I would like sketch floor plans and stuff. I think I wanted to be an architect at that time, but that didn't pan out. But it kind of just sparked that interest in property.
Yeah.
And then in my teenage years, I just really had an interest in property. I did my real estate course in 2012 because of that. Because I knew I wanted to move down here to Newcastle, I didn't want to like build up a database as a sales agent only to move down here. So that's when I transitioned into finance. But yeah, I think property is a bit of an emotional thing, right? Because you can go and find a nice property and all the rest of it, but it's also something that you can see, feel, touch. And as long as humans are on this earth, we need property, right? Residential property.
Yeah.
So because of that, that's why that's my investment choice, I guess.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question about the early years, because you said you're not good at anything, but then you've gone and done all of this and you seem like such a determined, hardworking person. Is that like a trait that you got from someone, or do you think that's something that you've developed over time?
I think it's probably a combination. My dad was always a hard worker. My pop was a hard worker. So I think I was able to watch that and like, I guess, gain some values from that. But I think over time as well, just working on that, working on the mindset, being disciplined in certain areas to just help catapult that. And then creating goals. When I did my TAFE course in 2012, my teacher at the time, not only did we learn about property, but I think we learned about just like goal setting and writing your goals down and that sort of thing. And I think that really stuck with me. I started to write goals up every year after that. And then having those goals there, looking at those goals, ticking them off, I think is super powerful to kind of keep moving towards that.
I agree. And I think it's the difference between a hard worker that stays doing hard work where they are, like doing the same thing day in, day out, and a hard worker that pushes themselves forward. Which is really cool.
Yeah. 100%. And I think just knowing like what you want to achieve, you're more determined to actually put steps in place to achieve that. So like obviously you can sit back and think that you want to buy your first home, but until you sort of plan that out and put goals in place to do that, you'll never start making those first steps towards doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And it can seem super daunting as well if like you create the goal, but then there's so many like little habits underneath that you need to complete consistently to get to that goal.
Yeah.
So breaking it down is super valuable.
Yeah. So how do you do that? What's your process for that?
I guess an example for my savings was I broke down all my fixed expenses at the time, reduced them everywhere that I could, understood what I could kind of live off as a minimum.
Yeah.
And back then it was before the whole inflation environment, right?
Yeah.
But I set a goal of the percentage I could save every single week. Then as soon as I got paid, there was an automated payment that went straight across to my savings account, which I set up as view-only access. So if I had a couple of beers on the weekend and I thought I was rich, I couldn't touch it.
Yeah.
And it's just those little things, right? That's like a discipline, make it a bit harder to get. So I guess that was one way to be able to set that up. So I break it down into that consistent weekly habit, and then it's like sticking to that budget and knowing like this is all I've got for the week.
And that's where that discipline comes in again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had a lot of people on here talk about like setting up their budget and how that's just done so many good things for them.
Yeah.
And especially around that automating it. So like you're not the one moving that savings into your savings account. It's just happening automatically and you don't even know that it's there basically.
And it's funny because it's a free and easy thing to do.
Yeah,
And it
so-
seems to be everyone's key to success.
Yeah.
It's so easy, right?
Yeah.
Like, you just set it up once and then it's there.
Yeah.
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 Let's talk about the mistake that you say that you've made in 2021 when you had that savings that you worked really hard for and then you went and bought the car. Why do you think that was a mistake? And then like how had that flicked the switch for you to not do that going forward?
Well, I think, so I kind of went through a period of time where I was working hard. I got that job and I went back to one job and I wasn't saving as much.
Yeah.
And I didn't really party or anything. And I kind of went through a stage where I started to party a little bit more. And I think because of that, and I reflect on this now, I lost sight of my goals a little bit. And that put me off track. I needed a new car. I went and test drove a WRX. I don't know if you know what that is, but they're fun to drive. So I went and withdrew the cash and went and paid for that
Yeah.
and bought that car.
And do you think that happened because like you'd been working hard for so long and then you were like, I should get to enjoy some of this hard work? So I feel like a lot of people get stuck in that. They're like always pushing and then they're like, when do I actually get to enjoy?
Or you see like other people around you that are buying cars and you're like, hey, I want to, like I've been working hard. I deserve that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
It probably was a combination of those couple of things. And I think I just needed a new car and I really didn't think the decision through and just really acted emotionally on it. But then flowing into like making a decision to go on an overseas trip and like, that was a great experience, right?
Yeah.
So it probably was a little bit of that burnout. But then later on down the track in that year, just my financial position changing so much, it was an awful phone call to get to be like, your car's going to cost $14,000 to fix.
Yeah.
yeah.
So it was just snapped me back into gear. I was like, okay, well, at the end of the day, I've got myself to this position, so now I'm going to get myself out of it. And get back to where I was, because it's not a good feeling to be in a bad spot, right?
Yeah. It's
so-
good that you got to make the mistake so young, like
Yeah.
at 21, and then to come back and instantly realize that you want to change. That's such a good starting point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of young people would go through that same thing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I think society just instills us to kind of go out there and just buy a car straight off out of school as well, get a loan for it and things like that.
Well, you
Yeah.
don't know, like you said, you didn't have any education about homes at that time.
Yeah.
So what are you meant to do?
Yeah.
You don't know what you
Watch
don't know.
podcasts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then after that point, is that when you started like investing in like your knowledge and sort of getting back on that strict path to your plan and setting your goals properly?
I wouldn't say I started to invest in the knowledge heaps at that time. because I was just working so much, and like those jobs I couldn't kind of learn on the go.
Yeah.
But once I got back to that position where I was out of debt, that's where I really started to build my knowledge base. I actually did my like Cert 4 in mortgage broking at that time as well. So not only was I learning about property, but I was just learning even more in depth the finance side of things. And that's been a big transitional skill from the finance space across to
I feel like
buyer's
it's
agent.
like, even though you haven't gone into mortgage broking, it's a great thing to learn, and everyone should know how it works. Like, it should be taught, like borrowing to buy a house should be taught in school, but
100%.
it's just not, and it just delays like how quickly people can get into the market because they just don't know.
Yeah. And some of that knowledge I find I'm guilty of, like, you forget that just some of that basic knowledge some people don't have.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you can have just that bit, it's going to go so far just to understand how things work.
Yeah.
So for people that don't have that knowledge, what would you say to them now? Where should they turn to?
It's just going out there and finding the information. I think in 2025 there's so much information out there which can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
But there's just so many ways to watch YouTube videos, and it's like, instead of being on Netflix or doom scrolling or whatever it is, right? Like, make that, it's discipline, make that cognitive decision to go and like learn about these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And as like a 16-year-old, like you can, there's so much information out there to learn and get ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
By the time you're 18, and then you can start to work towards those goals. And it doesn't always mean you can't save for a property, but also live life at the same time and still be able to travel and those things. It's all balance, right?
Yeah.
In 2020, when you bought that first investment property, what made you choose an investment property over like an owner-occupied first home buyer route?
Yeah, good question. That was purely because my income level at the time, I couldn't afford to get into the Newcastle market.
Yeah.
Because the market is expensive, yields were lower as well. And at that time, I put a lot of research into Brisbane, and I wanted to focus on Brisbane, and that's the marketplace I ultimately went into. And
did you do all this research? This was all yourself?
I actually used another buyer's agent at that point in time for the first one, and that was because I was working two jobs.
Yeah.
And I was actually in a lending job at that point in time, and that was very hectic, so I couldn't like put the time in myself for that one.
Were buyer's agents very common then?
No, they definitely weren't as common as they are now. I think there's been a big increase
for sure.
in buyer's agents. But yeah, I knew that I wanted to go into the Brisbane market. I knew I wanted a house on a large piece of land, and I went in North Brisbane. That's where I wanted to focus. So that was kind of the basis of that, and that was because Brisbane had sat flat for so long, and it was, I guess, in the next stage of its growth cycle. So yields were higher, purchase price was in my borrowing capacity as well, and that's where I chose to go. And then Brisbane has gone on.
And did that
awesome
initial buyer's agent that you used, did he give you some education around it that then you've taken that same way that he's looked at it and use that for your future properties?
I would say that all the due diligence I have today is from what I've learned throughout lots of years. It's a lot different, and we go into an incredibly amount more detail with like the due diligence side of things to make sure that that property is highly desirable. So we're very picky with what we target.
Yeah. So just on that, I guess, a bit more information about that for people who probably are looking to do like a similar thing to you.
Yeah.
What sort of things do you put in place to make sure like your structures for buying are set up correctly, like you're buying the right properties, and what do you put in place to make sure that your portfolio can basically grow from that one property to the 10 properties, or that 8 million to the 20 million that you're looking to go to?
Yeah. I think it's always imperative throughout the whole thing, but the first and second property can either set you up or set you up to fail.
Yeah.
And a lot of people out there are going to go out and try and just chase high yield sometimes, and they're sacrificing on capital growth. It's like, not that it's possible at the moment with rates, but people want a positive cash flow property that's paying them $50 a week, but that's not going to build your net wealth. The net wealth is going to come from the capital growth component. but balancing it with strong yield so you're
Yeah.
not forking out a massive amount. But it's getting the location right first, the area to target, and that's really understanding so many different fundamentals: infrastructure, population growth, income, economy in that local area. And then once you understand which city, because we focus on metro locations, because long term they outperform.
Mhm.
Obviously major regionals too, like Newcastle, but for the most part it's the metros. Once we understand the city, then it's down on a LGA point of view, understanding income levels in the LGA, occupancy rates, vacancy rates, so many different things to look at from that point of view. And then on an individual property level, it's making sure that there's lots of things in place to get in a quality pocket of that suburb as well. So we look at like public housing, we look at like flood assessments, noise assessments, make sure it's in that high quality, desirable location in a suburb.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So for someone that wants to build that portfolio the same as you, what do you think they need to have before they go and start doing that, like in their corner?
It's a whole team of professionals, really.
Yeah.
You can't, if you're working 40 hours per week, you can't put the time and energy into building the relationships. That whole team throughout the process, a buyer's agent, a mortgage broker, and a high quality mortgage broker, as you guys would know, an accountant, pest and building inspector, property manager. There's so many people that you need to have that are high quality to make sure the whole thing is seamless for you, lowers your risk as well.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of moving parts. And I guess as you start to make a couple of purchases, and they're most likely going to be in your personal name, but it will get to a point where you might need to shift your structures and start to purchase properties in companies and trusts, because they have some benefits later on, especially if you want to build a big portfolio like I do.
Yeah.
I guess the trust structures in the future, I guess the assets and the debts in those can then be excluded from lending without going in heaps of depth, but that can allow you to continue to borrow and purchase more properties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about like the mindset shift of like, how do you know that you've got all this debt behind you and not be afraid of that and continue to push forward, knowing that it's going to, in the long run, help you?
Yeah,
It's
I
a
don't
loaded
get
question.
too... It doesn't freak me out too much. I probably should. If I looked at it every day and just focused just on that debt level.
Yeah.
But I think if you focus on that your net wealth position is increasing year on year, I think that is better to focus on. But it's also understanding that over time, inflation devalues debt. So you might have $5 million debt today, but in 10 years' time, that $5 million is going to be worth less. So that debt's less as well. You're getting your capital growth and your rental income growth, which are kind of offsetting that as well. And it's just being structured down the track as well, in a position where you can start to pay some of that debt down as well. Because you've got the option of interest only or principal and interest, and you can pull some levers on different properties to start reducing that debt.
Yeah.
Or as like you get more sophisticated, you might purchase a property knowing that you're just going to hold it for a 5-10 year period, sell that property, use the profits on that to reduce debt in other ways.
So to manage all your properties, are you always in contact with your broker and then I guess like your property manager?
Yeah. Once you get to like 10 properties, you're going to talk to your property manager a fair bit. Once you got one or two, like, it's not going to be as bad. But that's, I guess, one negative to property, that as an investor, you have to have the mindset things are going to go wrong.
Yeah.
There's going to be repairs and maintenance. Tenants, they might go through some sort of life crisis or whatever it is, right? There's so many different things that can happen.
Yeah.
So you have to be ready for that and understand that you're going to have to spend money on maintenance and repairs. Like, that's the reality of it. And then if you're being proactive and you want to continue to invest, it's looking at the portfolio every 3 to 6 months, see if you've got that capital growth, if you've got that equity available, if you've got the income available, can I leverage some equity from this property or this property and move it into another asset. So it's just, it's being active and proactive to kind of keep going. Or even if you only want a couple, you still have to be on top of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, you can go.
Okay, I was just going to say that, like, you touched on so many things that you look at when buying properties, and you also mentioned it's like those first one or two properties can really set you up to succeed or fail.
Yeah.
So would you recommend that, like, first home buyers or like a first time investor reach out to a buyer's agent such as yourself just because you do have that knowledge? Or, like, at what point should they start to reach out to these other services to sort of help them build their own portfolio?
Yeah. I guess sometimes when it's first home buyer, it can be a challenge because they might have just saved up enough for like a 5% deposit based on schemes, it does just depend. So that first one, it might not be an option to use a buyer's agent, but you can definitely go out there and learn. I think a strong thing as a first home buyer is the negotiation piece.
Yeah.
And the reality is, like, there's sales agents out there that know that people are a first home buyer and they can really work to pull them up in price and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You hear some crazy stories and people are bidding against themselves and raise prices.
Yeah.
You've had that.
Yeah, I definitely had that before.
Yeah. Magically, there's another offer on the table that's magically 5 or 10 grand higher. So
Yeah.
the agent, pushes higher and all that sort of thing. So I think as a first home buyer, just some basic level negotiation skills, I think would be solid. If you're looking at the investment kind of side of things, that's where using a professional is going to help you get the right asset in the portfolio based on your individual circumstances so you can keep moving forward and build your wealth.
Yeah, I had that exact situation happen, like one recently where I had clients made an offer on this property. It was their first home. They were really happy with this property. The agent came back and said, hey, there's another offer out there, but couldn't tell them what it was. So wouldn't tell them if it was better than theirs or worse than theirs, or like it might not have even existed. So they came back to me and were sort of like, hey, what do we do with this? And we broke down like exactly what they were happy to pay for that property and what the repayments were going to look like and just the position that they were going to be in. And they didn't end up increasing their offer, but they still won the property. So
funny that.
Yeah, they were very happy with that because they obviously didn't want to increase their offer. And ended up getting the property that they wanted anyway. So
yeah, that's good. And sometimes it's like looking at comparables too as well.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's like if everything I think selling for 900 and they're trying to get you to pay $1 million, like clearly there's some issues there if they're similar properties.
So, Casey, you've achieved so much and all by yourself. What would you say to other people that are starting their journey and wanting to get to a similar place to where you are now?
I would say just put education into like budgeting and finance and kind of mapping that out so you can start to consistently save. Do some of those similar things that I've mentioned, like set up that automated payment into an account you can't touch, and just start to consistently save. Get a second job. You just got to put in the work to save and get to where you want to be, and then put that money to work.
What's your end goal now, do you think, with that? Like, obviously you've got the goal for the 20 million, but why?
I think to kind of live the life that I want to live and have those choices down the track, I think that's kind of the wealth base that I need to get to be able to create the rental income, but then offload some of those properties a little bit down the track to then create that more passive income. I'm not like a materialistic person. I don't need fancy cars or anything like that. But if I want to go on an overseas holiday or multiple holidays a year with the family, or I just want to train more and work on my health and fitness more, it's just having those choices to be able to do that.
So more about freedom of time and flexibility of choices.
100%. That's more why I do it, right? And not having, like, I love what I do now, which is powerful, but if down the track you can only work 2 or 3 days a week and just have more balance, right? Not have to work 5 days
Yeah.
per week or 6 days per week. It just makes it more enjoyable.
I
Yeah.
think that's everyone's end goal too, to
Yeah.
not have to be tied to work
Yeah.
all the time. So to be able to hear your story and hear how you've put in the hard work now and are going to be able to achieve that, I reckon pretty soon.
Yeah.
I hope so.
See where you're at the moment.
We'll see.
We'll have to
I'll
come
probably
back.
be a bit more grey by then.
We'll have to do a follow-up episode when
Yeah.
you have.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be soon.
I hope
But yeah,
so.
it'll be really inspiring for people to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it's already inspiring, like
Yeah.
what you've done so far. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank
So
you.
final thoughts, if you could sum up your money story in a sentence or a phrase or a word, what would you say?
I guess you can start from not having much, put in some hard work, save hard, put that money to work for a 10-year period and completely change, I guess, your financial situation.
Mm.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good.
It's not
Okay.
easy, but
Let's end with a little game.
yeah.
This game should be fun. I'm actually excited for this one.
I'm not. I'm not good
We
at games.
usually
We've already
do
discussed this.
A not as fun game. So I think this will be good.
Yeah, we usually do like a true or false
Yeah.
or like a yes or no sort of game.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're doing this one then.
Sounds a bit crazy.
So this one's a bit sporty. So it's Casey's Property Picks Dream Team Draft. So you get to build your ultimate investment property one feature at a time.
Yep.
So it's draft day and you have the clipboard.
Mm-hmm.
You're building your ultimate investment property dream team, but instead of players, you're drafting property features. You get 5 picks, each from a different category. Think of it like building a footy team. Every position matters, but some are your MVPs. So
Yep.
let's figure out what the all-star lineup is.
Yep.
So our first category for your investment property dream team is location.
Yep.
What do you think?
So location would be a metro location,
Yeah.
which we've obviously discussed a little bit today. And I'll just make an assumption that we've got like 700 to 750 to work with. I'd purchase in Queensland,
Yep.
in the Brisbane marketplace. And there'd be a couple value adds that we'd look at, which we'll get to, I guess, in a minute. But yeah, location, metro Brisbane.
Metro Brisbane.
Yeah. So if the location was like your captain, they sort of run your team. Now you've got the workhorse of the team, so your property type.
Yep.
So what sort of property type would you be looking at?
Yeah, so it would be a house with a large land component, minimum 500 metres squared. Ideally, if we could get 800 metres, that would be even better.
Why house?
Because as per core logic,
Yeah.
houses in metro locations outperform all other asset classes over the last 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
They increased 453%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's that, but then you can add value to houses too with the land component.
Yeah.
So just on that with the houses, are you looking for houses that you can add value to?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
And there's a few different ways that we can look at that. I think
Yeah.
that's the next part of the game, isn't it? I'm pretty sure.
The playmaker.
Yeah.
Rental strategy, what would you choose for that?
So to be a long-term rental,
Yeah.
and it would be trying to balance at least a 4% gross yield, hopefully higher, but just where kind of the environment is now, 4% is a good starting. And that's just to make sure that we're not like losing heaps of cash flow per year while we're still getting that capital growth component.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I guess you sort of touched on it, but putting all your players together, you've got your game plan, so your yield versus your growth.
Yeah.
So what do you sort of target there? I mean, you sort of touched on it there, but
Yeah, and it's that balance. So we want it to be a capital growth play at the end of the day, because capital growth is what really builds that wealth. Just having something that's paying you $100 a week or $200 is not going to dramatically change your financial future.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, yeah, the capital growth component for sure.
And we've got the last one, a bonus feature. This
Yeah.
one's called the wild card weapon.
Yeah.
So what bonus feature would you add to your dream property?
The bonus feature would be a value add in a couple of different ways. Dual occupancy, where you can manufacture both cash flow and equity, or a granny flat, which is a cash flow injection, or just like a renovation. And
Yeah.
it might not need to be straight away, but maybe that property is just a little bit dated and you can do a cosmetic reno in the future and create some equity.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah,
if this popped up tomorrow, would you personally buy it, or based on today's market, would you change strategy?
Every day of the week, I would buy it.
Yeah.
In the right locations, prices are on discount to what they're going to be in 12 months' time, 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Prices don't get cheaper over time.
Are you looking for this property at the moment? Currently looking?
I'm looking to actually. I've already secured a couple last year for like the dual ox, so
Yeah.
I'm looking at creating the additional dwellings now.
Yeah. Cool.
And as soon as I'm allowed to buy more properties, I'll do that as well. And we're obviously always looking for clients too, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, always.
Always.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah,
You
thank you for
have
that.
such an incredible story and amazing insights for our audience. So thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for all
It's
the
been
knowledge.
fun.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cool. This is Money Stories.
Brought to you by Amy and Ben from In Financial Services.